Imagine living a life where every movement, every word, and even your very existence could be met with punishment. A life where fear is constant, and freedom is not just distant, it is unimaginable. This was the reality for millions of enslaved people throughout history, including children and pregnant women, who were subjected to brutal whippings. Their pain was not merely physical. It was a calculated method to instill fear, control, and obedience. The wounds they endured were sometimes reopened, treated with salt, pepper, or harsh substances to intensify their suffering, a cruel reminder that their bodies were not their own. In this video, we explore stories of resilience and survival amid unimaginable hardship. While these accounts are disturbing, they are also a testament to human strength and the enduring spirit that refused to be broken. We will journey through the personal experiences of those who lived through such oppression, shedding light on the human cost of a system built on cruelty and injustice. Picture a young child, barely able to understand the world around them, forced to endure pain beyond comprehension, or a pregnant woman, carrying life within her, yet facing the threat of punishment at the hands of those who claimed ownership over her body. These stories are not just historical accounts, they are echoes of humanity demanding recognition, empathy, and understanding. By uncovering these experiences, we gain a deeper appreciation for the rights and freedoms we often take for granted today. The lessons of the past remind us that dignity, respect, and compassion are not privileges, they are fundamental human rights that must be protected for everyone, everywhere. Throughout this video, we will also highlight moments of courage and hope, showing how even in the darkest circumstances, people found ways to resist, endure, and fight for their freedom. These narratives encourage us to reflect on our own lives and to value every human being, understanding the significance of empathy, justice, and equality. If you find this story meaningful, eye-opening, or inspiring, make sure to like this video to support our work in sharing history that matters. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to join us in exploring more untold stories, real-life experiences, and lessons that continue to shape our world today. Together, we can honor the past, reflect on the present, and help build a future where every individual's humanity is recognized and respected. Stay with us as we begin this journey into history, uncovering the challenges, the endurance, and the remarkable resilience of those who lived under unimaginable conditions. Their stories deserve to be heard, remembered, and shared. The horrors faced by enslaved people extended far beyond the lash. In the shadowed corners of plantations and hidden workhouses, the cruelty of those in power often took forms so extreme that they seemed unimaginable. Yet they were grimly real. As we have already explored, whippings inflicted physical and psychological trauma that could last a lifetime, with wounds deliberately reopened and treated with substances like salt, pepper, or turpentine to magnify suffering. But for many, the terror did not end there. In order to maintain complete control and to ensure compliance through fear, slave owners and overseers sometimes escalated their brutality to unimaginable acts, inflicting severe bodily harm in ways that were designed not only to punish but to break the very spirit of those they enslaved. Accounts from historical records, personal narratives, and legal documents reveal the horrifying reality that slaves could be subjected to mutilation, a form of punishment intended to instill terror and absolute obedience. Imagine a man like Moses Roper, forced to witness and endure a litany of cruel acts, including having tar poured over his face and body, fingernails pried from his hands, and toes smashed under the weight of a sledgehammer, all as a spectacle meant to reinforce dominance and submission. The purpose behind such horrors was not rehabilitation or correction in any sense, but a systematic exertion of absolute authority. a way to remind every individual that resistance could bring unimaginable consequences. The Middle Passage itself foreshadowed the brutal methods that awaited those who survived it, as recaptured escapees faced threats of death, mutilation, or other punishments intended to serve as stark warnings to others who might consider fleeing. On sugar plantations, where labor was grueling and overseers merciless, exhaustion or even a moment of human weakness could result in a limb being severed or other forms of permanent injury, demonstrating the extent to which punishment was intertwined with terror, control, and profit. Even the accounts of individuals who survived such brutality offer a window into the mechanics of oppression. The stories of women and children, particularly, illustrate a layer of cruelty that compounded the horrors of daily life. Female slaves who were deemed disobedient or who resisted their masters could experience broken teeth or other acts of mutilation. Measures that were as much about public display as about discipline. Pregnant women and young children were not spared from these punishments. Their suffering was a methodical tool used to ensure that every member of the enslaved community internalized the omnipresent threat of violence. This calculated use of terror was part of a broader system designed to maintain order through fear, where the physical body became a canvas for the exercise of unchecked power. Yet, amidst these stories of unimaginable cruelty, there are also testimonies of survival, resilience, and endurance that speak to the extraordinary human spirit. Individuals like Harriet Jacobs and William Wells Brown navigated environments where the threat of mutilation or extreme punishment was constant, and yet they found ways to document their experiences, escape, and eventually share their stories. The act of remembering and telling these stories serves not only as a historical record, but as a powerful reminder of what it meant to live under such oppressive conditions. It also forces us to confront the stark reality that the deliberate infliction of bodily harm was not random. It was a systemic strategy, deeply embedded in the structure of slavery, and it was carefully engineered to ensure that enslaved people understood the consequences of resistance, dissent, or even perceived misbehavior. The psychological impact of such cruelty was profound, reaching beyond the immediate physical injuries to instill fear, helplessness, and a pervasive sense of vulnerability. Every instance of mutilation or extreme bodily harm served as a warning to others, an example of the devastating cost of challenging the rigid hierarchy imposed by slaveholders. Yet, it is precisely in the recounting of these stories that we witness acts of subtle defiance and courage, the quiet endurance of those who lived, the daring escapes of those who fled, and the preservation of memory by those who survived to tell the tale. These narratives connect seamlessly with earlier discussions of whippings, salting of wounds, and other forms of punishment, illustrating that the spectrum of cruelty was wide-ranging but consistently aimed at dehumanizing and dominating the enslaved population. In understanding these acts of extreme bodily harm, we gain insight into the broader mechanisms of control within the institution of slavery. Punishment was never merely about correcting behavior. It was a performative exercise in power, designed to terrorize, humiliate, and remind each individual of their precarious position. It linked directly to other forms of suffering, including public spectacles, branding, chaining, and forced labor, creating a continuous system where the threat of violence maintained the structure of oppression. Through these stories, we not only acknowledge the depth of human cruelty, but also recognize the resilience, ingenuity, and courage of those who survived. Their experiences remind us of the critical importance of human rights, empathy, and the moral imperative to prevent such atrocities in any form. By reflecting on these narratives, we honor the endurance of countless lives and ensure that the lessons of history continue to inform our understanding of justice, dignity, and humanity. The relentless cruelty that enslaved people endured extended far beyond the whip or the threat of physical injury. seeping into every corner of their lives and transforming ordinary days into endless tests of survival and endurance. And among the most horrifying of these punishments were the methods designed to inflict prolonged agony while simultaneously serving as a warning to others. We have already seen the devastating effects of whippings, the deliberate reopening of wounds, and the terrifying acts of mutilation. Yet in some cases, the cruelty escalated to methods that were calculated with a terrifying ingenuity, aimed at maximizing both physical pain and psychological terror. One such method, vividly recounted in personal narratives like those of Harriet Jacobs, involved suspending slaves above fires or dripping hot fat onto their bodies, a punishment that was excruciating as it was symbolic, emphasizing the complete control that slaveholders sought to exert over every aspect of a person's life. In these moments, the line between punishment and spectacle blurred, as the suffering of one individual became a lesson for an entire community. A visual demonstration of what could happen to anyone who dared to resist or fail to meet the expectations imposed upon them. Picture the scene: a rope tied securely around the torso of an enslaved individual, hoisted above a fire carefully tended to ensure the slow descent of dripping hot fat. Each drop a searing reminder that their body belonged not to them, but to another, and that disobedience, hesitation, or even perceived defiance could provoke this horrifying ritual. Harriet Jacobs' accounts bring to life the terror of these experiences, revealing not only the physical agony but the pervasive fear that accompanied every task, every word, and every glance. The fires that consumed flesh in such punishments were not merely tools of immediate discipline. They were instruments of terror, shaping the mental landscape of enslaved communities, embedding fear and submission so deeply that resistance became a daily struggle against both external authority and internalized oppression. This method of punishment resonates with earlier accounts of whippings and mutilation, forming a continuum of cruelty in which the human body was continually used as a canvas for asserting dominance, and where survival required navigating not only the work demanded of enslaved individuals, but also the unpredictable and often sadistic whims of those in power. The intentional use of fire and heat as instruments of punishment exemplifies a pattern seen throughout slavery. Methods were chosen not only for their immediate efficacy in enforcing obedience, but also for their ability to leave lasting scars, both physical and psychological, that would persist long after the event itself. In many, this method of torment parallels the accounts of Peter, whose back bore the marks of whippings intensified by salting and the application of painful substances, and the experiences of Moses Roper, who endured acts of mutilation designed to break his spirit. Each story, while distinct in its details, contributes to a broader understanding of the systematic nature of cruelty within the institution of slavery, showing how punishment was meticulously engineered to instill fear, suppress resistance, and maintain an unyielding hierarchy of power. The fires and hot fat were particularly effective because they transformed punishment into a sensory experience that could not easily be ignored or forgotten, embedding a visceral memory of pain and helplessness that served to control not just the individual but the wider enslaved community, demonstrating how terror was as much a social tool as a physical one. Moreover, these acts of suffering were rarely isolated. They were part of a network of strategies used to maintain absolute authority. The same plantations that employed whipping, mutilation, and forced labor often incorporated this method of suspended torment, reinforcing the message that every failure, whether real or imagined, could lead to unimaginable consequences. Children, women, and men alike were subject to these punishments, and the presence of witnesses ensured that the fear extended beyond the immediate victim, rippling throughout the community to enforce compliance through collective dread. This approach was a direct extension of earlier methods such as public burnings, branding, and the use of chains, each designed to serve both punitive and pedagogical functions, to teach lessons about obedience, hierarchy, and the consequences of defiance. Yet, within this narrative of cruelty, there are also stories of remarkable endurance and subtle forms of resistance. Many enslaved individuals found ways to survive these punishments, to flee when possible, and to record their experiences for posterity, as Harriet Jacobs did, ensuring that future generations would understand the realities of life under oppression. Their testimonies are invaluable, bridging the gap between historical abstraction and the tangible human experience of suffering, survival, and resilience. They connect seamlessly with the previous accounts of whippings, salting, and mutilation, forming a continuous story of the multifaceted cruelty that defined the lived reality of slavery, while also highlighting the incredible fortitude of those who endured it. Understanding the use of fire and hot fat as punishment is essential for grasping the broader mechanisms of control that govern the lives of enslaved people. These methods were never random or capricious. They were deliberate, strategic, and deeply rooted in a system that sought to dominate every aspect of human life. By linking these acts to earlier examples of physical abuse, we gain a cohesive understanding of how terror was systematically applied to enforce submission, control labor, and maintain the social order desired by slaveholders. In reflecting on these accounts, we not only witness the depths of cruelty inflicted, but also the remarkable resilience of those who survived. A resilience that challenges us to honor their lives, learn from their experiences, and recognize the enduring importance of human dignity and justice across time. The unimaginable horrors that enslaved people endured extended far beyond the ordinary tools of oppression, and in the darkest corners of plantations, cruelty often took on grotesque and inventive forms designed to terrorize, humiliate, and completely dominate, as we have explored through whippings that left open, salted wounds, through mutilations that shattered bodies and spirits alike, and punishments that suspended individuals above scalding fires or dripping hot fat. The human body became a canvas on which power was brutally asserted, a site where obedience was demanded at the expense of suffering and fear. Among these brutal practices, one stands out for its sheer sadistic ingenuity and the visceral terror it inspired: the use of barrels embedded with protruding nails, into which enslaved people were forcibly placed and rolled down steep hills, an act engineered to inflict maximum physical pain while simultaneously serving as a public display of control and power. This punishment, known in historical accounts from narratives such as those of Moses Roper, exemplifies the extreme lengths to which some slaveholders went to assert dominance, a method so horrific that it illustrates the terrifying continuum of cruelty that permeated the institution of slavery. Imagine, if you will, the sheer terror of being bound within a confined space. The hard, splintered wood pressing against the body, the jagged points of nails arranged inside ensuring that every movement brought fresh agony, as the barrel teetered at the top of a hill before being released to tumble downward. The force of the descent, the collisions with uneven terrain, and the unpredictability of the roll transformed the act into a cruel lottery where survival was uncertain, and severe injury was all but guaranteed. The spectacle of such punishment was not incidental. It was a calculated measure to instill fear, to send a message to any who might contemplate defiance, escape, or even the simplest acts of independence. Just as the whip and the salting of wounds left enduring reminders of submission, and the suspension above fires carved terror into both body and memory, the barrel punishment served as both execution and demonstration, an example of the extremes of human cruelty wielded as a tool of social and psychological control. This method of torment aligns with the broader patterns of punishment previously discussed, including whippings that reopened wounds with salt or pepper, the terrifying mutilations that left lasting scars, and the scalding torments designed to terrorize and control. All these acts share a common purpose: to strip individuals of autonomy, to communicate power in the most direct and violent way possible, and to embed a pervasive fear that extended beyond the immediate victim. The barrel punishment, however, stands out not only for its brutality but also for its theatricality, transforming the punishment of one person into a form of social instruction. Communities of enslaved people, observing the role, the screams, the injuries inflicted, internalized the danger, the stakes, and the cost of perceived disobedience, ensuring that compliance was not merely expected, it was enforced through constant, tangible fear. The accounts of survivors like Roper offer a window into the physical and psychological realities of this punishment. Survivors describe the rolling barrels as instruments of terror that could crush bones, tear flesh, and leave individuals permanently maimed. Yet the mere threat of such treatment often sufficed to enforce obedience among others. This practice, like the salting of whippings, the mutilations, and the torments involving fire or hot fat, illustrates how terror was a systematized element of slavery, a deliberate mechanism for maintaining power and controlling bodies, movements, and behaviors through fear. Every injury, every scream, every spectacle served to reinforce a hierarchy in which the enslaved were constantly reminded of their precarious position and the extreme consequences of resistance. Yet, within this narrative of unrelenting cruelty, there are also threads of human resilience and endurance that cannot be overlooked. Those who survived such punishments often did so by relying on courage, ingenuity, and determination, finding ways to preserve their dignity even in the face of extreme suffering. The telling of these stories, as Roper did, transforms experiences of terror into enduring records of strength and survival, connecting them to the broader tapestry of suffering imposed through whipping, mutilation, fire, and other forms of punishment. In recounting these experiences, we see the continuity of cruelty as well as the persistence of human resilience, a duality that deepens our understanding of the psychological and social dynamics of slavery, where fear was meticulously manufactured, yet hope and survival persisted in the lives of those who endured it. This particular method of punishment also reminds us of the social and performative aspects of oppression, where pain and fear were deliberately made public, both to control the individual and to influence the broader community. Just as branding, chaining, and public burning communicated dominance, the rolling barrel created a moment of horror meant to resonate far beyond the victim, embedding lessons of submission and vigilance into the consciousness of all who witnessed it. It illustrates the extent to which enslavers viewed the body as an instrument to be shaped, broken, and displayed, linking directly to the other punishments we have explored. The whip, the hot, the fire, and the mutilations that altogether created an environment of constant threat and surveillance. In reflecting on these practices, we are compelled to recognize both the depths of cruelty inflicted and the incredible resilience of those who survived, documenting their experiences to ensure the lessons of history are not forgotten. The rolling barrel punishment, with its combination of terror, spectacle, and severe injury, fits seamlessly into the broader narrative of oppression and endurance, connecting with every previously described method of punishment and reinforcing the central theme that survival, resilience, and the human spirit endured even in the face of systematic, calculated brutality. These stories, horrifying as they are, provide critical insight into the mechanisms of control within slavery, the resilience of the human spirit, and the enduring importance of remembering, reflecting, and learning from this painful history. The brutality inflicted upon enslaved people was never arbitrary. It was deliberate, systematic, and designed to exert total control over every aspect of a person's life, shaping not only their labor but their very existence through fear, pain, and constant surveillance. As we have traced through previous accounts, from whippings intensified with salt and pepper to mutilations that shattered bones and severed the human spirit. From punishments involving scalding fat to barrels lined with protruding nails rolled down steep hills, the cruelty was multifaceted, combining physical torment with psychological terror to ensure compliance. Among these practices, one of the most harrowing forms of punishment involved enclosing individuals in smoke-filled rooms, a method often referred to as the Virginia play, in which enslaved men and women were tied, whipped, and subjected to suffocating smoke as a means of control and intimidation. This punishment, like the others we have examined, was not merely about correcting behavior or enforcing work standards. It was a tool designed to dominate, terrorize, and strip away autonomy in the most calculated ways imaginable. Imagine the suffocating haze of a smokehouse, the air thick with the acrid sting of burning tobacco stems, swirling and choking as the enslaved individuals struggled to breathe while bound and whipped. The combination of physical pain from the lashes and the relentless assault on the lungs created a sensory onslaught that went far beyond ordinary punishment. Embedding trauma deep within the body and mind, each inhalation carried the threat of collapse, each lash a reminder of the consequences of perceived disobedience, and the very structure of the punishment transformed the room into a controlled environment of terror. The psychological impact extended far beyond the immediate moment, creating an ever-present anxiety in those who witnessed or heard the suffering of others, reinforcing submission not through reason or understanding, but through visceral fear. This method of punishment resonates deeply with the spectrum of cruelties already described. The open wounds of whippings, the searing agony of scalding fat, the crushing terror of barrels with protruding nails, and the mutilations inflicted upon the body all share a common thread. They were performed to exert absolute authority, often in public or semi-public settings, where the suffering of one individual served as a warning to the wider enslaved community. The smokehouse, though enclosed, functioned similarly, transforming pain into a didactic instrument. It demonstrated, in the most immediate and horrifying terms, what defiance or perceived inadequacy could bring, reinforcing a social hierarchy predicated on terror, obedience, and the total subjugation of human beings. The Virginia play, as described by William Wells Brown and other first-hand accounts, was both a method of punishment and a performance of power. Slaveholders and overseers orchestrated these moments with precision, ensuring that the suffering was prolonged and unmistakable, that it penetrated the psyche as deeply as it did the body. Unlike whippings that left visible scars, or mutilations that permanently altered the form of a person, the smokehouse inflicted trauma that was internal and inescapable, infiltrating the very act of breathing, a fundamental and inescapable necessity. It served as a reminder that under this system, even the most basic functions of life could be manipulated as instruments of control. A message reinforced repeatedly through the interconnected spectrum of punishments already examined, from public burnings to hot fat suspensions and rolling barrels. Yet, these harrowing accounts also reveal the resilience and ingenuity of those who endured them, enslaved individuals who survived the smokehouses, as well as the other methods of torture previously described, demonstrated extraordinary courage, navigating a world in which danger was constant and authority was absolute. Their testimonies, preserved in narratives, legal records, and personal recollections, allow us to connect the Virginia play to the broader continuum of oppression, highlighting how each punishment, though unique in method, served the same purpose: to enforce submission, to instill fear, and to maintain a system in which human lives were treated as property. The psychological and physical trauma inflicted in these smoke-filled rooms mirrored the strategic cruelty of whippings. Salting wounds, mutilations, and barrel punishments, forming a consistent framework in which terror was not incidental but essential to the institution of slavery. Furthermore, the smokehouse underscores the performative and social dimensions of punishment. Even when confined to a single room, the terror extended beyond the immediate victims, as word of such punishments traveled among enslaved communities, shaping behavior through anticipation and fear. The echoes of screams, the accounts of suffocation, and the knowledge of what awaited any perceived transgression created a culture of constant vigilance, embedding lessons of obedience and fear that transcended individual experiences and became collective truths. In this way, the smokehouse connects seamlessly with public punishments. Branding, chaining, and other extreme forms of control, all of which serve to consolidate power while eroding personal autonomy and instilling a pervasive, enduring fear. In reflecting on the Virginia play and its place within the broader narrative of slavery, we gain a deeper understanding of the mechanisms through which oppression was maintained. It was never solely about physical domination. It was about control over the body, the mind, and the social environment, ensuring that fear operated both visibly and invisibly. By examining these practices in conjunction with the other punishments we have discussed, the whippings, mutilations, fire, hot fat tortures, and rolling barrels, we can trace a continuous thread of terror and resilience, revealing both the depths of cruelty inflicted and the extraordinary fortitude of those who survived. Their stories remind us that history is not merely a record of suffering but a testament to human endurance, courage, and the unwavering pursuit of dignity even in the face of relentless oppression. The use of public executions as a method of control within the institution of slavery represents one of the most chilling examples of how terror was weaponized to maintain power and suppress resistance. Extending the continuum of cruelty we have already traced through whippings, mutilations, fire-based punishments, barrels with protruding nails, and smoke-filled rooms designed to suffocate and break the spirit. These executions were never random or secretive. They were deliberate spectacles, orchestrated to demonstrate the absolute authority of slaveholders and to instill a pervasive fear that extended far beyond the individual victim, reaching the wider community of enslaved people and anyone who might have harbored thoughts of defiance. Unlike other punishments that might occur in relative privacy or within the confines of a plantation, public executions were performative acts, attended by large crowds, including neighbors, townspeople, and other enslaved individuals, transforming the suffering of one person into a communal warning and a calculated instrument of social control. Consider the harrowing scene. An individual, accused of a perceived transgression or actual offense, is brought forth before a gathered crowd, restrained and subjected to a punishment that would often result in death. The air thick with anticipation, dread, and the scent of smoke or burning materials. The victims were not merely punished. They were displayed, their pain and terror made visible as a tool to educate, intimidate, and dominate. The spectacle itself became an extension of the psychological warfare inherent in slavery, echoing the previously discussed methods such as the whipping and salting of wounds that left permanent physical reminders, the mutilations designed to humiliate and terrorize, the scalding torments involving hot fat, and the rolling barrels with protruding nails that transformed punishment into a horrifying visual lesson. In each, the body of the enslaved person became a medium through which authority was asserted, fear was transmitted, and the social hierarchy was reinforced with brutal clarity. Public executions also served to reinforce the legal and social disparities embedded in the system of slavery. The severity of the punishment meted out to enslaved people was often disproportionate to their actions. A stark contrast to the leniency frequently granted to white individuals who might have committed the same or worse offenses. Stories such as that of Jerry, executed in South Carolina for a crime that a white person might have received a minor penalty for, illustrate the cruel inequities that underpinned the entire system. The punishment was not simply retribution. It was a demonstration of racialized power, an assertion that enslaved people existed under a legal and social order designed to subjugate, dehumanize, and terrify. Public executions thus functioned as both punitive measures and performative lessons, turning suffering into spectacle in order to maintain a system in which fear was as essential a tool as labor or property. The presence of spectators magnified the psychological impact, as those forced to watch were reminded not only of the fate awaiting those who resisted but also of their own vulnerability and a dependence upon the whims of those in power. The horror witnessed in these executions was carefully calculated to resonate in the minds of all who observed, ensuring that compliance extended beyond immediate physical control and into the realm of fear-conditioned behavior. In many, public executions were the apex of terror, building upon the continuum of previous punishments. They were more than whippings, more than mutilation, more than scalding or rolling barrels. They combined physical agony with a highly effective psychological spectacle that reinforced the enslaver's authority and the enslaved person's precarious existence. These executions did not occur in isolation, but were intertwined with other forms of punishment and control. Just as branding and chaining marked individuals visibly, and as smoke-filled rooms instilled internalized fear, the public nature of executions created a collective consciousness of terror, a shared understanding of the stakes involved in resistance or even minor perceived offenses. Observing the suffering of one individual became a communal lesson, shaping behavior through anticipation, dread, and the vivid knowledge that disobedience could result in extreme pain or death. This integration of spectacle and discipline demonstrates the sophisticated, if horrifying, system of control that governed every facet of enslaved life, linking each method of punishment into a cohesive framework of oppression where fear operated both immediately and preemptively. Yet, as with other forms of extreme punishment, the narratives surrounding public executions reveal remarkable resilience. Those who endured, those who witnessed, and those who survived such moments carried forward the memory of suffering and survival, documenting experiences in ways that challenged the narrative imposed by oppressors. The continuity between public executions and other previously discussed punishments, from whippings and mutilations to fire and barrels, smokehouses, and hot fat torments, underscores a recurring theme, that enslaved people navigated a landscape of constant threat, yet found ways to endure, resist, and preserve a sense of humanity even under relentless cruelty. Their accounts provide a bridge between the horror of these events and the broader historical understanding of slavery, illustrating both the calculated mechanisms of control and the extraordinary courage required to survive them. By situating public executions within the continuum of punishments we have explored, we gain a clearer picture of the systemic nature of oppression. Every act, from the subtle to the spectacular, functioned to enforce obedience, instill fear, and communicate the unassailable power of the enslaver. These spectacles, though horrifying, are crucial to understanding the historical reality of slavery, as they connect vividly with other forms of punishment, demonstrating how terror, violence, and psychological control were interwoven to sustain a social system built on dehumanization. Reflecting on these events invites recognition of both the depths of cruelty inflicted and the resilience of those who survived, reminding us that while history records suffering, it also records endurance, courage, and the enduring pursuit of dignity amidst unimaginable adversity. The practice of branding enslaved individuals with heated metal marks represents one of the most tangible and enduring symbols of ownership, control, and the brutal calculus of power within the system of slavery, seamlessly connecting with the array of punishments we have already explored, from whippings intensified with salt and pepper to mutilations, scalding torments, rolling barrels, suffocating smokehouses, and public executions designed to terrify and dominate. Branding was both a literal and metaphorical imprint, a method by which slaveholders could claim the bodies of the enslaved as property, while simultaneously communicating to the community at large the consequences of resistance or escape. Unlike temporary wounds or punishments whose effects could fade with time, the mark of a brand was permanent, etched into skin as a constant, inescapable reminder of subjugation and the ever-present power of those who claimed ownership. Imagine the terrifying reality of standing before a heated iron, the metal glowing ominously, knowing that any attempt to resist, flinch, or plead could only increase the pain, yet understanding that submission was the only way to survive the immediate torment. The searing pain of the brand was immediate, excruciating, and unforgettable, burning flesh and embedding an indelible symbol of authority into the body. These marks often carried letters, symbols, or insignia identifying the owner or denoting the enslaved person as a runaway or a punishable individual, transforming the body into a visible statement of possession and a warning to others. Branding, like whippings, salting of wounds, mutilations, or public executions, served both as punishment and as communication, turning pain into a lesson that extended far beyond the individual victim. The community of enslaved people would witness or hear of these marks, internalizing their meaning and the consequences of defiance, while the enslavers reinforced social hierarchies and the unchallenged authority that underpinned every facet of daily life on plantations and in markets. Brands were not merely punitive, they were strategic tools of control, ensuring that enslaved individuals remained physically and psychologically tethered to the demands of their owners. They connected directly to the continuum of terror already described, whippings that left scars and reopened wounds, mutilations that destroyed the body's integrity, scalding punishments with hot fat, barrels rolled down hills, smokehouses suffocating and whipping individuals, and public executions performed for the eyes of all. Each of these methods relied on fear, pain, and visibility to communicate the absolute power of enslavers. And branding operated at the intersection of these objectives, combining physical agony, psychological trauma, and social signaling. The brand's permanence meant that even when individuals escaped, their bodies carried evidence of their past bondage, creating a network of fear that extended into freedom, a tangible reminder of the oppression they had endured and the authority that sought to maintain it. The historical records of branding, such as advertisements for runaway slaves, illustrate the widespread institutionalization of this practice and its function as both punishment and deterrent. Reports of women and men branded for attempting to escape, often with letters seared into their faces or other visible parts of the body, underscore the deliberate intent to make disobedience both memorable and socially marked. These marks were more than physical injuries. They were psychological instruments, ensuring that the terror of past punishment persisted in the consciousness of the individual and the wider community. Like the public executions that drew crowds to witness the consequences of defiance, branding made control visible, communicating to all who saw the marks that resistance was costly and submission was demanded. Branding also reinforces the social and racial inequities embedded within slavery. While the punishment of enslaved people was severe and often permanent, those same actions would rarely, if ever, be inflicted upon white individuals who defied legal or social norms, highlighting the deeply entrenched inequities and the deliberate use of physical markers to sustain racialized hierarchies. this practice in connection with other punishments like whippings, mutilations, rolling barrels, and suffocating smoke houses illustrates a calculated system in which terror was codified, normalized, and operationalized to enforce compliance, obedience, and dehumanization. The body became both a site of punishment and a medium of communication, carrying the imprint of authority long after the immediate pain had passed, serving as an ongoing reminder of the enslaver's control and the precarious existence of those subjected to this system. Yet, in the midst of this extreme cruelty, narratives from survivors highlight resilience and survival, connecting branding to broader stories of endurance. Those who bore these permanent marks, along with the scars from whippings, burns, mutilations, and other tortures, not only survived physically but carried forward testimony, memory, and documentation of the horrors endured, ensuring that the cruelty of these practices could not be hidden or denied. The permanence of branding, while intended as an instrument of fear, became also a record of history, testament to the lived experiences of enslaved people, linking directly to the broader continuum of punishment, resistance, and survival that defines our understanding of slavery today. In this way, branding connects seamlessly to all previously described punishments. It shares with whippings the immediate physical agony, with mutilations the permanence of bodily trauma, with public executions the social spectacle, with smokehouses the psychological terror, and with barrels the ingenious cruelty designed to maximize suffering. It exemplifies how slavery relied on a multifaceted, strategic application of pain and fear to maintain authority, demonstrating the interconnectivity of punishment methods as instruments of oppression. Reflecting on branding, alongside the other extreme punishments previously explored, reveals not only the depths of cruelty inflicted upon enslaved people, but also the extraordinary resilience required to survive and bear witness, underscoring the importance of remembering, understanding, and learning from these historical realities to honor the dignity and humanity of those who endured them. Chains have long served as one of the most visceral symbols of slavery, embodying both physical restraint and the psychological weight of oppression, perfectly aligning with the continuum of punishments we have already explored, from whippings intensified with salt and pepper to mutilations, scalding torments, barrels rolled down hills, suffocating smoke houses, public executions, and branding with heated metal. They were not merely tools of confinement. They were instruments of terror, meticulously employed to dominate, control, and break the human spirit, ensuring that enslaved individuals remained subjugated in both body and mind. The sight of chains, their cold, unyielding metal links, served as a constant reminder of the inescapable authority of the enslaver, their presence alone sufficing to instill fear and submission among those who bore them, as well as those who witnessed their use. Imagine being shackled by chains, each link biting into flesh, the weight of the metal pulling relentlessly, constraining movement and preventing even the simplest gestures of autonomy. The pain was immediate and unrelenting, yet it was the prolonged, cumulative effects that inflicted the deepest damage. Joints swollen, muscles strained, skin bruised and torn, and the body slowly adapting to a state of constant discomfort and limitation. Beyond the physical agony, chains carried profound psychological consequences, serving as a visible marker of ownership and a reminder that every action, every breath, was under the scrutiny and control of another human being. Unlike whippings, branding, or public executions, which could be temporary or situational, the experience of being chained was continuous, a constant imposition that forced the enslaved to navigate life with their freedom circumscribed at every turn, mirroring the omnipresent, calculated terror of all other forms of punishment previously described. Historical accounts reveal that chains were used in diverse and cruel ways, from simple shackling to suspension by neck, wrists, or limbs, often inflicting extreme pain, deformity, and injury. In some documented instances, enslaved individuals were found hanging, their bodies stretched or contorted painfully, suspended in ways that could last hours or even days. The combination of gravity and restraint magnified the suffering, while the impossibility of escaping or repositioning heightened the sense of helplessness and despair. These forms of punishment shared a cruel symmetry with other techniques we have already examined. The public spectacle of executions that instilled fear in the community, the searing permanence of branding, the calculated agony of hot fat and barrel-based punishments, and the suffocating terror of smoke-filled rooms. Each method exploited the body as a medium for psychological control, demonstrating how the enslaver's authority extended beyond labor or obedience into every facet of existence. Shaping perception, movement, and even the ability to endure suffering. Chains also operated as instruments of social signaling, much like public executions or branding, communicating to other enslaved people the consequences of resistance or escape. The visibility of chained individuals served as a warning, a living demonstration of power, and a tangible example of what awaited those who defied the social order imposed by enslavers. The psychological reach of chains extended beyond the immediate victims, reinforcing submission through anticipation, rumor, and the shared witnessing of suffering. Just as whippings, mutilations, and smokehouses created a pervasive culture of fear, chains ensured that even when other punishments were not actively being inflicted, their presence remained an enduring reminder of the enslaver's dominance and the high stakes of disobedience. Furthermore, chains contributed to the continuity and intersection of punishment strategies. Their use often accompanied other forms of physical torment, such as whippings or beatings, magnifying the overall suffering. In certain scenarios, chains were combined with public displays or forced labor, integrating pain with social instruction to maximize compliance. This method mirrors the calculated cruelty of barrels lined with nails, the intense terror of scalding fat or fire, and the suffocating horror of smokehouses, each designed to control both body and mind through a combination of immediate physical harm and prolonged psychological impact. Chains, in their stark simplicity, amplified these effects by making restraint itself a tool of punishment and instruction, transforming an object of labor or transport into a device of oppression. Visibility and fear. Yet, as with other forms of cruelty in the continuum we have traced, chains also highlight the resilience of enslaved individuals, whose survival required extraordinary endurance, both physically and psychologically. Despite the constant threat of restraint, injury, and public humiliation, many managed to adapt, resist, and maintain a sense of identity and community, documenting their experiences through narratives, recollections, and oral histories. These accounts link the experience of chains directly to the broader spectrum of slavery's punishments, providing insight into how physical and psychological control operated in concert to enforce obedience, instill fear, and sustain a system that commodified human life. The enduring impact of chains, as both a literal and symbolic instrument, reinforces the interconnectedness of punishment methods, demonstrating how each practice, from whippings to branding, from barrels to smokehouses, formed a cohesive strategy of domination and terror designed to secure submission while eroding autonomy and dignity. By situating chains within this broader narrative, we recognize their function as more than mere physical constraints. They were deliberate tools of control, psychological intimidation, and social instruction, seamlessly integrated with other extreme punishments to sustain the oppressive structures of slavery. in understanding the role of chains alongside whippings. Mutilations, hot fat punishments, rolling barrels, smokehouses, public executions, and branding, we gain a clearer perspective on the pervasive, calculated nature of terror, the continuity of oppression, and the extraordinary resilience required to survive under such relentless conditions. These stories, though harrowing, illuminate the lived experiences of those who endured unimaginable suffering, preserving a history of endurance, courage, and humanity that persists in our collective memory and understanding of slavery as brutal legacy. The system of slavery was not only a mechanism of physical oppression, but also a finely tuned instrument of social and economic manipulation, where the lives of enslaved individuals could be completely altered through demotion or sale, connecting seamlessly with the brutal continuum of punishments we have explored. From whippings, mutilations, scalding fat, and rolling barrels, to suffocating smokehouses, public executions, branding, and chains. Skilled artisans, domestic servants, or those who held positions of relative privilege within a plantation could find themselves abruptly stripped of status and forced into the backbreaking, grueling labor of the fields as a punitive measure, while others were sold to new owners known for even harsher conditions, a practice that often led to the permanent separation of families and the destruction of social networks that had been painstakingly maintained under oppressive circumstances. This form of punishment, though less visibly grotesque than mutilation or public execution, carried profound and lasting consequences, intertwining the physical, emotional, and psychological dimensions of slavery into a single, devastating experience. Imagine a young woman skilled in domestic work, having learned to cook, clean, and serve with precision, suddenly stripped of her place in the household and sent into the merciless sun to toil in fields where exhaustion and injury were inevitable, where oversight was harsher, and where the likelihood of abuse increased dramatically. Similarly, a male artisan, who may have been valued for his craftsmanship or knowledge, could be sold to a distant plantation where the rhythm of labor was unrelenting and the treatment cruel. His entire life uprooted as punishment for a minor infraction or even mere suspicion of disobedience. The threat of such demotions and sales hung over enslaved communities like a dark cloud, a constant reminder that no level of skill, loyalty, or relative privilege could shield one from the reach of authority, echoing the ever-present terror imposed by whippings. Mutilations, scalding punishments, rolling barrels, smokehouses, public executions, branding, and chains. Each of these punishments served to remind the enslaved that power was absolute and their autonomy illusory, and demotion or sale amplified that reality by targeting not only the body, but also the social and emotional bonds that sustained life under oppression. The consequences of demotion and sale were multifaceted. Beyond the physical strain of harsher labor, individuals faced profound psychological trauma as familiar surroundings, friends, and family members were abruptly removed, often without warning. For children, parents, or spouses, the sale of a loved one could mean permanent separation, a heart-wrenching rupture in a world where social and familial networks were crucial to emotional survival. Even for those who survived physically, the emotional toll of family separation created scars as deep as any inflicted through whippings or mutilations, underscoring that slavery's violence operated simultaneously on the body and the heart. These measures were designed to destabilize, to ensure that enslaved individuals understood that resistance or perceived disobedience could result not only in immediate physical punishment, but also in long-term upheaval of life and relationships, mirroring the calculated cruelty found in other methods of control. Historical accounts provide vivid examples of this dynamic, illustrating how owners wielded demotion and sale as tools of social and psychological domination. Figures such as George Washington, who utilized these measures alongside whippings and other punishments, exemplify how even prominent owners incorporated the threat of labor reassignment or forced sale into their system of control. Skilled workers sent to the fields faced extreme physical challenges, exposed to long hours, harsh weather, and brutal oversight, while those sold to distant plantations confronted not only rigorous labor, but also the terror of an unknown environment. New overseers, and the possible erasure of any support networks they had painstakingly built. Families could be fractured for generations, children separated from parents, spouses torn apart, all in the service of reinforcing submission and maintaining the economic and social hierarchy that slavery demanded. The connection between demotion, sale, and other forms of punishment becomes clear when considered alongside the broader spectrum of oppression we have traced. Whippings, mutilations, hot fat punishments, barrels, smokehouses, public executions, branding, and chains each functioned to control the body, to instill fear, and to communicate authority. Demotion and sale extended this control into the social and emotional sphere, targeting the very structures of community, relationship, and identity that allowed enslaved people to survive psychologically under extreme conditions. By destabilizing social bonds, removing privileges, and imposing harsher labor conditions, these measures ensured that the enslaved remained vulnerable not only to physical punishment, but also to profound, ongoing emotional distress. In this sense, demotion and sale are integrally linked to the other forms of cruelty, forming a cohesive strategy in which every aspect of life, body, mind, and social structure was governed by fear, authority, and the constant threat of harm. Yet, as with other forms of punishment, narratives of survival illuminate the resilience and resourcefulness of enslaved individuals. Despite demotions, sales, and the fracturing of families, communities found ways to endure, to maintain bonds through letters, oral histories, and covert support networks, preserving a sense of humanity and identity even in the face of deliberate efforts to erase it. The interconnection between these experiences and other punishments, whippings, mutilations, fat torments, rolling barrels, smokehouses, public executions, branding, and chains reveals the comprehensive nature of control within slavery and the extraordinary courage required to navigate and survive such a system. Understanding demotion and sale within the context of these other forms of punishment provides a richer perspective on the multifaceted mechanisms of oppression that defined slavery. It underscores that cruelty was not limited to immediate physical violence, but extended into the social, emotional, and economic realms, forming an integrated system designed to dominate, intimidate, and control. By reflecting on these experiences, we honor the resilience and endurance of those who lived through them, recognizing both the pervasive cruelty they faced and the remarkable strength they exhibited in surviving, resisting, and preserving their humanity against overwhelming odds. As we draw this harrowing journey through the multifaceted horrors of slavery to a close, it is impossible to ignore the ways in which enslaved individuals were forced into the most intimate and invasive forms of exploitation, particularly sexual coercion and forced reproduction. Across generations, enslavers manipulated the lives of men and women, dictating not only their labor and daily existence but also their bodies and reproductive capacities, often valuing enslaved people primarily for their ability to bear children who would, in turn, become additional property to sustain the economic machinery of slavery. This deliberate control over reproductive life highlights the insidious depth of power that enslavers wielded. Control extended beyond punishment and labor into the most personal, private aspects of human existence, eroding autonomy and agency in ways that are difficult to fully comprehend. The story of Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings serves as a stark illustration of these dynamics. A relationship marked not by equality but by profound imbalance of power, where the lines between consent and coercion are clouded by the structural realities of slavery. Hemings, born into bondage, was subject to laws and social conditions that rendered refusal nearly impossible. Her reproductive choices effectively determined by her owner. Through such acts, enslavers sought not only to increase their labor force but to assert dominance over every conceivable aspect of the enslaved person's life. A pattern tragically repeated across countless plantations and households in the United States and throughout the Americas. This practice of forced reproduction did not exist in isolation. It intersected with the full spectrum of punishments we have examined: whippings that scarred the body, mutilations that permanently altered it, scalding hot fat tortures, barrels rolled down hills, suffocating smokehouses, public executions, branding with heated metal, chains that bound the body, and demotions or sales that fractured communities. Together, these methods form a comprehensive system of control that aimed to dominate the enslaved in body, mind, social networks, and even future generations. Each individual punishment was horrifying in itself, but when considered as part of this broader web of oppression, the calculated cruelty becomes even more apparent. The enslaved were subjected to a lifetime of control, fear, and exploitation, often without respite, and their suffering was both a personal and communal reality. Yet, amid the unimaginable brutality, the enduring spirit of those who survived these circumstances remains a testament to resilience and courage. Despite the physical, psychological, and social traumas inflicted upon them, enslaved individuals found ways to endure, to care for one another, to preserve aspects of identity and culture, and to resist in whatever ways they could. Their stories, passed down through narratives, historical documents, and oral histories, allow us today to bear witness, to understand, and to learn from the injustices of the past. By acknowledging the horrors of forced labor, sexual exploitation, and reproductive coercion, alongside the other punishments we have explored, we honor the full scope of human endurance and affirm the dignity that was so systematically denied. It is essential to carry these lessons forward. The history of slavery is not just a record of cruelty. It is a reflection of human capacity for both oppression and resilience. A reminder of the consequences when power is unchecked and humanity is denied. Understanding this history challenges us to recognize injustice in all its forms today, to advocate for human rights, and to cultivate empathy for those whose freedoms are constrained. By educating ourselves and others, we ensure that the suffering of those who lived through slavery is neither forgotten nor repeated, and the values of dignity, autonomy, and justice guide our actions in the present. Thank you for taking the time to engage with this difficult but crucial history. If this story has opened your eyes, touched your heart, or deepened your understanding, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel so you can continue to explore, reflect, and participate in these important conversations. Sharing this content helps spread awareness and honors the memories of those who endured unimaginable hardships. By staying informed, asking questions, and remembering the past, we can collectively work toward a world where every human life is valued, every individual's dignity is respected, and the injustices of the past serve as a foundation for building a more equitable future. Good night, and may we all sleep with a renewed commitment to honor history, embrace empathy, and carry forward the lessons of resilience and humanity that those who suffered so profoundly have entrusted to us.